Hey folks! Oh my gosh, there's like quite a few people here already. Oh, I think the monitor's still on, Aaron, or at least I can hear myself in your headphones. Hi everybody! How are folks doing? As you can tell, we have a wider angle today because instead of eating a tiny donut, I'm going to be eating nachos, and I'm gonna have a special guest join me. The nachos are still being made, so I'm also trying this on Instagram today because I got a new phone. So this is on Instagram Live, but it's going to be a much more inferior experience for the people on Instagram. And I also can't really see the monitor. Lots of people are waving on Instagram right now. Sorry. I just thought it would be a nice experiment since you can't push to Instagram because Instagram doesn't play with everything. How's everybody doing? Where are folks from? I think I see quite a few international folks around right now. It looks like we have an Australian. Where are folks at? This is actually not a dress, believe it or not, Claire. Claire said, Lily, your dress is amazing. This is a jumpsuit, and I have a wide angle lens today, so you can actually see it. But this was part of my stimulus purchases because I decided to spend my stimulus money on like small local businesses. So I got this jumpsuit, which was from a Black-owned place where you can find them. I think you can find them on Instagram, but it's Nemo Fashion. Anyway, they had like fabulous jumpsuits, so I got this. Australian and Russian checking in. Nobody else said where they were from yet. And then I also got these earrings, which are pretty exciting. I don't know if you can see them because of the lights, but they say smash the patriarchy on them. So I'm wearing a lot of my stimulus things. This is the distracting part about using my phone for streaming on Instagram is now I have like two lenses to contend with in different places. Anyway, nachos are still happening. Claire said yes. Oh, the jumpsuit. Quasi-rural Massachusetts, Connecticut, Washington State, Maryland, Massachusetts. I feel like I'm singing that like state song. Hi folks. Hi. So the reason we are doing a vegan nachos mukbang, actually it's a half vegan nachos and vegetarian nachos mukbang, was one, I don't think that because we switched to doing live streams every week as opposed to every other week during quarantine, I just don't think that I can sustainably eat a donut every week for like my own sugar intake. So, but I did include the donut from, oh, Jess Paul is here. That's awesome. So Jess Paul made this, and that was one of the Etsy shops that I spent some of my stimulus dollars at. And Jess makes like food-based art, and I saw this donut hat. I wore it last week, and I was like, I have to get this for the live streams. Jess has like tons of different donut-based food items, and as someone whose donuts is part of their livelihood, I felt like I could purchase them all as tax write-offs. But how many donut crowns does one realistically need for their, like, how much does one realistically need donut crowns in their life? Like, even if I could theoretically wear them like every week. Anyway, we're doing nachos today because I wanted nachos anyway. Nachos are kind of like a thing that I eat when I have finished something significant. It's like a treat that we do. And I thought, yeah, nachos deserve this. This was a week. During this week, I managed to finally successfully get a payroll protection loan, which I have talked about on the streams before. So the payroll protection loans were loans that they issued for small businesses that essentially the federal government said, hey, we will give you this loan. It's 100% forgivable if you hire back or keep on staff, but it has been so stressful generally to get. It's been the first round, it like ran out within 2 weeks, but functionally ran out within the first couple days. It brought the system down. Everybody was applying for it. I ended up applying at a bunch of different banks. It was such a stressful program. And kind of unexpectedly, I got a call from our banker on Thursday morning. And this is for a place where I'm the finance manager at. So it's a nonprofit, which does qualify for the loans. And I got a call from our banker saying, we did it. We got an E-Tran number for you. And that day, we got the funds, which is really phenomenal. But the question we're going to actually tackle today in the live stream, in addition to eating nachos, because we deserve it, also wrapped the fund drive last night for the radio station very successfully. So I feel like there's a lot to celebrate. But we are going to tackle the question of how did they print that money? Because that payroll protection loan that I got this week, it came via the federal government. And that was part of a stimulus bill, which was $3 trillion stimulus bill, which is an impossible amount to comprehend. And the question is, where are governments getting this money from? And we've seen governments actually find a way to push money to its citizens and to small businesses and also to large businesses at an extremely rapid rate. And that isn't just for healthcare, it's also just to prop up the economy, right? We're looking at 20 to 30% unemployment in the United States. That has a huge effect on the economy, but we're also looking at what is possibly a liquidity crisis in a bunch of different industries. And we need the economies of the world to slow down because the things that power the economy are people going places, people making things, all things we need to not happen right now. Oh, nacho delivery. I was some very patient nacho waiting. So, this is the vegan nachos here. We'll discuss what goes into vegan nachos. So, a lot of people have been asking the question of where does this money come from? How are governments even affording to do this? I actually got a listener question in when I was asking very particularly ask me your questions about unemployment. Ask me your questions about what's happening with the markets right now. I had a listener email me in a question. It was actually a voicemail, and it was essentially where is this money coming from, and why are tax returns still a thing if the government is still in debt, and how can we print this money? And I was well, asking about the concept of money is a little broader than I really want to answer on the show while I'm just trying to answer questions about how to apply for unemployment. But in the end, it's still a really interesting question. So I thought it'd be good for the extra live stream. All right. This is special guest today and Nacho Maker. And also Stream Runner. So this is why one of the things is down here on the stream. I guess we have to adjust the camera to try to fit you in.
We can both be in half of the frame on Instagram.
You have to show off your pants, though, because Aaron's big concern with being on the stream was having to match the fluff. You are very inflexible. Is that as far up as you can get your leg?
Well, there's a table here too.
Sure. Blame the table.
Just to be clear, I only agreed to this because then it means I get to eat nachos.
So, I guess that was... Anyway, I guess we've never done a mukbang that is, we've never done any live streams together where it isn't just me. And we've also not done one that isn't a donut, and this is not a real donut. This is a donut that Jess made, so we'll see if we can actually handle eating real food on camera. Should we light the food better? That is kind of... a little pink.
Pink food. Yeah, I forgot to light the food.
All right. I'm going to try to hold it up. It came out of the oven, so try to hold it up to the camera. I don't have my person that can normally adjust the camera to see it. This is also a wide angle lens. All right. There we go. So these are vegan nachos. I guess it's really easy to see on the Instagram stream comparatively because that can't have a wide angle lens. Anyway, these are the vegan nachos, and what are the ingredients that go into these? Those are real nachos, which is why the cheese actually melts, because it's not fake.
Actually melted cheese.
Yeah.
So it's a base layer of chips, then the bulk of it is fried onion and bell pepper, and soy rizo. And the soy rizo really adds a lot of the flavor.
And there's 2 layers that go into it. So, like, Aaron is the nacho expert. Also, you have, like, an alert set up that you get alerted anytime someone mentions nachos.
Yeah, I can hear it like a mile away, too.
So yesterday, so I keep leaning out because I like don't know how to do this on Instagram Live. It looks like more people are joining the Insta stream, and I'm just letting you know we're actually doing this on YouTube right now. But I thought we would try it on Instagram, but nothing is set up for you, and I'm pretty much ignoring it. So I'm sorry, but it's an experiment. But I can see people like waving and stuff. So
come over to YouTube; it's more fun here.
Yeah, YouTube, and you can actually like, see the food and stuff, and like half of our faces aren't cut off. Anyway, So, nachos, there's like a whole preparation that goes into them. It is first you chop and saute onions and green bell peppers, and you season them with something.
Chili powder, garlic powder if you have it. We tend to run out of garlic powder pretty frequently here. And soy rizo.
And soy rizo, yeah. And then
you add jalapenos, pickled, preferably. Other peppers like habanero and serranos, as many as you can put on there. And then a cheese layer. You bake that to melt the cheese over that layer. Then you do the whole thing again. Second layer of chips, second layer of peppers and soy rizo and more peppers and cheese. I also have olives on mine because I like olives.
Yeah, and I don't like olives. Once Aaron snuck an olive into mine to see if I really didn't like them in a very true Greek grandmother sort of way.
It turns out
I really don't like them. So mine, I will say the best cheese that I found for it, if you have access to a Trader Joe's, which I know like vast majority of places don't, but they have a brand of like bakeable vegan cheese, and it is terrible. Like it's like inedible plastic, and you're really not supposed to eat it unless you bake it. And you have to bake it at like 425, like quite high. But it works extremely well for nachos just because it's essentially liquid glue when it melts. And melting is not a quality that a lot of vegan cheese is great at. So, unfortunately, grocery shopping is challenging right now. I'm not allowed to go to the grocery store, as I mentioned every single week in the live stream, because I am starting to become bitter about it. Anyway, that cheese is not available, so I have right now Daya, which is like probably the most common vegan cheese, and also some of the Whole Foods brand, which makes these like strands that are like this long.
They're so long.
They're so long. They're unreasonably long. You can kind of see them in here. Anyway, they're very long. I guess let's...
Is it time? I'm so
Yes.
hungry.
So Aaron is here to be, in addition to eating nachos, to be the sane person who doesn't understand, like, how U.S. Treasury bonds work.
I don't have an economics degree, no.
Yeah. So Aaron is going to act as all of you, but you can also ask questions.
It's not really acting. It's legit. I've absorbed a little bit hanging around you for a while, but...
And Aaron makes hot sauce that we usually eat, but this hot sauce... Oh, we're never going to get this because it's a wide angle lens. This hot sauce is the Trader Joe's habanero hot sauce, and I find it to be the best on the nachos, better than all of the other. I'm a huge fan of Secret Aardvark, which is a locally made one. Nachos are really good.
This is so good. I forgot how good nachos are.
Aaron acts like we didn't
just have nachos 2 days ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: remember how I mentioned nachos are for really hard weeks? I don't know if you heard, but every week has been a hard week lately. And, yeah. Denise says, liquid glue, you're totes selling this cheese. Here's the thing. I never said it was good cheese. I said it was good for nachos. It has a very explicit purpose for the cheese, which is that it's holding together all the stuff that tastes really good in nachos, which is like the soy rizo. There's enough flavor going on in nachos that you don't... Flavor is not the quality you pick the cheese for. You pick it for its, like, melt and stickability. For, like, you pick it for the structural integrity.
Yeah, there's so many chilies on this. How many? So we have...
We have a problem.
Habaneros.
That's us, though.
Like, fresh chopped habaneros. We've got fresh serranos. We've got pickled jalapenos. And then also this, hot sauce. It's just the right amount.
All right. So, while we're eating this, first question, I guess, is where does this money come from?
What money?
What money? So, let's talk specifically about where the stimulus bill came from. But this generally applies to whenever governments do anything. I feel like we should like slightly tilt this. We're really down to like almost no live viewers on the Instagram because turns out I'm not delivering good content to a thing I'm ignoring. So, where did this trillions of dollars come from? Most people understand like the concept of the fact that when you spend more than you have, you go into debt, right? Like we get that concept. That essentially credit cards, right? Like credit cards are essentially saying, hey, I don't have it now, but I'll have it later.
Sure.
Give me that. So the US government, any central government can essentially also issue debt. And when you issue debt, it's called a liability, right? It's a liability on your balance sheet, so to speak. Money you have or assets you have, like your house, are an asset. And the flip side of that is liabilities, which could be if you have a mortgage on your house, the house is an asset, but how much you have on the mortgage is a liability. If you are a government, you have some assets, but let's ignore assets for the time being. But what you do have is the ability to issue securities debt. And do you know what a security is?
Is it a safe?
No. That was a good question. I like how Gregor's like, I'm super jealous right now. Nachos. We are really just turning this into a nacho stream. I'm sorry. Look at this. This is a good looking one, though.
Yeah, the trick is to get a good mix of all of the ingredients in every bite. That's kind of the goal that you're going for.
Yep. So
when you're eating these.
I know. You want to have like the equal distribution between everything on each bite.
Yep.
All right. So
securities
are, you own some stocks, right? Like you have a retirement portfolio and you own stocks. That's a security. Anytime, there are two different types of securities. There is asset securities. Well, there's equity securities and there's liability securities. So equities are stocks, which are in your portfolio. And
you own some part of a company.
You own some part of a company. But
that's really just magic money anyway, right?
Well, this is all magic money.
Okay.
Securities are essentially different classes of magic money.
Okay.
And they're real in some essences, but the securities are essentially anything that exists that is like a kind of fictional concept. Right? Let's say it. Like, securities are things that exist in our economy that are mostly numbers moving around.
Okay.
And
like our bank accounts?
Vika is translating this into Russian for us live, I think. I don't know. I can't fact check you, Vika. I'm at level 1 in Duolingo on Russian. All right. So I like this, yeah, mixing the economy with some Russian lessons for everyone. All right. So there's the flip side of a equity security means that you own a piece of the company. And what the money that you make back is when they make money, you make some of the interest, or you can make money off the sale of that piece of the company that you own if it's more valuable to people than when you bought it. Okay. Which is the basic concept behind stocks. Did that make sense? So here's the next concept. Now we have what are liability securities. And liability securities are your mortgage. If you have a mortgage, that is a liability security. That someone out there owns that and is buying it and selling it around. I don't know if you remember the whole toxic asset thing from the last recession, but toxic assets were liability securities, which was bundling up a bunch of mortgages, and then companies would buy those bundled mortgages, and they would figure out a way to then they would buy, and then they would trade them. And it turns out they were toxic because they weren't doing their due diligence on checking whether or not people were going to pay back their mortgages.
So they were selling mortgages, but the mortgages were basically had no value because people weren't going to pay those back. Mm-hmm. So they were worthless mortgages people were selling.
Yep.
So it's like if I tried to sell securities in these nachos.
These nachos would become very invaluable by the end of the pan, and there would be nothing left.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be a good deal for someone to buy those securities.
Okay. But let's say that at the end of the pan was the bet that you made. You essentially were saying, I believe that Lillian is going to finish this pan of nachos. So, like, the bet that you're making is you're saying, I will buy your nachos now, and then when you finish them, then you're going to pay me back, and you're going to pay me back with slightly more nachos. That's the interest, right? That they're paying off, which is how mortgages work. That is also how bonds work. And that is what governments and corporations do, is they essentially say, hey, I need money right now, but look, I'm good for it. You know I'm going to finish these nachos. You know I'm going to make more money. And so I will loan it to you. And if you have a lot of confidence in someone and you're like, yes, I know Lillian is very good at finishing nachos. I watch her finish nachos every week. Then you probably are going to be like, oh, pay me back an extra 2 jalapenos. Not very much, right? Very low interest rate. But if you think, no, I've seen her. She doesn't finish those nachos. She sometimes folds them up and puts them in the fridge. You're like, it's going to take me a while to get paid back. And there's a possibility she won't finish it. It'll sit in the fridge and it'll end up moldy. She'll throw it out. I'm not going to get my amount back. Then you would charge me a lot more because it's a bigger risk for you.
Yeah.
So
I need a whole jalapeno for that.
Yeah. This is a very low interest rate regardless because we have a lot of jalapenos in this. Is this making sense so far? My attempt at a nacho analogy here?
A nacho... No, can't do it.
Can't do it?
There's a pun in there somewhere.
Nachology?
Yeah, see, almost.
Yeah, it's really hard. Alright, I'm asking people on the stream and not just Aaron. Is this making sense so far?
So... Plus, we need to actually get some food in our faces.
I know. The problem is that we are talking so much that the nachos are growing cold, and I'm very concerned about that.
As was described in that analogy.
All right. So, I'm not going to extend the nacho analogy because it takes way more brain work than I have.
Huh. It was fun, though.
So, imagine... Do you remember the whole Greek bond fiasco? Vaguely.
I remember, like, the stuff that happened in Greece was a big deal with money.
All right, so...
I don't remember the details.
Joe says it's making sense, but she's done economics before. All right, this is good that it's making sense thus far. So, essentially, U.S. governments and corporations can issue bonds, and the bonds are saying, hey, we'll pay you back later. How do they pay back those bonds? So you pay it back with your income. I pay it back with my eating of all of my nachos in the very complicated nacho example. The crunching versus appetizing inspired. We're trying. I'm sorry. I don't know. I might not be a natural mukbanger. We thought it was an experiment.
It's like ASMR.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe get a snack yourself and enjoy this. It was meant to be a chill live stream. I don't do anything chill in my life, but I've been trying.
So
Vika said the Greek default that happened in the 2000s-ish. Yes, I think Vika was like 3. Yes, so Greece was part of the euro. It's still part of the euro, which is a currency in many ways that's similar to the US dollar in that it unites a bunch of totally disparate economies and different social places. Because I think the best description I've had of the United States for foreigners is the fact that the U.S. is actually a bunch of states standing on top of each other in a trench coat pretending to be a country. And I was like, oh, this is such a good description of the U.S. economy. People have joined on Instagram. Fair warning, we're trying out the Instagram thing, but we actually don't have a plan for it. We're mainly streaming on YouTube. We already eat nachos and explaining the U.S. economy. So that's what's going on Instagram. All right. So I'm glad people are getting snacks, because otherwise I would just feel weird about eating this on camera. So where were we at? I mentioned Greek bonds. So the problem was that Greece was using this currency that was uniting all these different economies. And the value of some of those economies, they'll pay them back. The problem was that Greece was in a massive amount of debt, similar to the United States. But how does it earn the money back to pay this back? Well, people go to work and they pay taxes, and that is income to the government, and that's how the government pays back bonds. Right? That's the government's income, is taxes. In the United States, we have the largest GDP in the world. People pay a lot of taxes, not as much as maybe they should, but that's a different discussion. Not getting into the tax policy on this, let's just say, understand that when governments and individuals make money in the US economy, that contributes to GDP, which contributes to taxes, which then is income to the government, and that is how they pay back the debt that they issued in bonds. Mm-hmm. The Greek government was not doing a great job. They had massive unemployment, they had a bunch of structural issues in their economy, which they always had, and they didn't have very good reserves. They actually had less reserves than they were supposed to have to join the euro, but there were cultural reasons why they were allowed to join the euro, same as Italy. So the problem was the percentage that everybody was demanding from Greece for their bonds was incredibly high, which is the exact same thing that happens to you. If you have a low credit rating and you go try to borrow money on a credit card or for a house, then they say, your history does not suggest you're going to pay this back. And that's exactly what happened with Greece. Greece had defaulted on bonds previously, had not had enough taxes to pay back the people that they owed money to, which aren't people necessarily, but the other central governments and institutional buyers that bought their bonds. And people are like, no, we're gonna jack up how much you have to pay us. And the amount that the interest that they were paying was north of 20%, which is, equivalent to what you would pay on a credit card, like a not good credit card, right? So here's now what I want you to understand about the US economy. We issue bonds, and we are very in debt. To be clear, we just passed this $3 million, or this $3 trillion. I can't even say $3 trillion because it doesn't feel real. So we issued this $300 trillion stimulus package, and we were writing ourselves more debt. So we were issuing more bonds right now. And where are we getting that money from? You and me are going to work and paying taxes, theoretically.
Not more than we were paying before.
Not more than we were paying before. But overall, the U.S. economy is generally growing, with the exception of right now. We are generally growing.
So...
But how much do you think... Let me talk with my mouth full. How much do you think the U.S. government pays on their bonds? What do you think their credit rating is?
It's probably very good credit, right?
Here's the thing. We always pay back, as a country, the money that we owe. And U.S. Treasury bonds, which are bonds issued by the federal government, are considered the safest asset class in the world. And that pretty much hasn't varied for about 50 years now. So U.S. Treasury bonds are considered incredibly safe. You probably, almost anybody in the U.S. and most international people have some U.S. Treasury bonds in their retirement portfolios. So if you have any investments in your 401k, any of that, some of it is held in U.S. Treasury bonds. And that's because U.S. Treasury bonds are considered very secure. And you know why they're very secure? One of the ways you can tell that people think they're very secure is that our interest rate is less than 1%. The U.S. government can borrow interest at a crazy low rate from the rest of the world because the rest of the world wants to hold U.S. Treasury bonds.
Wait, why do people want to buy them?
Why do people want to buy them?
If the interest rate's so low.
Because they are considered stable. They're just above holding your money in cash, but they return a little bit of income to your portfolio.
Okay.
And they're desirable around the world. One of the other things to understand about US dollars in particular is that it's not just a soft power thing. It's, yes, Joe says, my God, that's low. Yes, it is incredibly low. And generally when it comes to what is called, this is where international trade comes in, and feel free to pause me at any point if this gets confusing, because that probably means it's confusing to other people, because this is where things start to get confusing, just generally. So the way that it works is that U.S. Treasury bonds are bought by you, by me, by everyone in the world, and most central banks hold them. And one of the reasons they hold it is that U.S. currency is... we all got together as countries in a rare show of economic, cooperation, and actually decided that the US dollar would be the global exchange currency. And what happens is when, for example, when countries trade with each other, so here's a good example. I got this thing from Starbucks. I worked there. I got an employee discount. Please don't judge me. It's also very sparkly and I wanted it. It was almost definitely made in China. Yes, it says made in China on the bottom. So this was made in China. China is a export economy and they have a huge population. And so one of the things
what does being an export economy mean?
Export economy means that China exports their whole, what drives their economy, what makes them make money so that they can pay back their own debt is that they have a lot of people producing things to export, so goods to export.
What's the alternative? Charging your own citizens?
Import
taxes?
Economy or knowledge economy. So
okay.
The U.S. actually we have the largest economy in the world, but we have what is called a trade deficit with China because we tend to import goods and we export knowledge. So the U.S., we could get more deep into this. There's something called comparative advantage, but generally, if you have a lot of labor and your currency is cheap on the global market, then you're going to want to produce goods because those goods are going to cost very little to other countries, right? If your currency is trading at a low rate compared to their currency, then buying their goods is going to be cheap. You see this when you go on holiday to a country where your currency, whatever your currency is, trades at a really advantageous rate, and you're like, damn, everything's so cheap, right? You're like, oh, it's like when we go vacation in Korea. I guess you haven't been to Korea. I've been to Korea.
I have not.
Where have we been where we were really surprised at?
Not Sweden.
Not Sweden. Yes, this is true. That has less to do with the exchange. It has a lot to do with the exchange rate. It also has to do with the fact that they are not an export-based economy. They are a knowledge-based economy. There's some oil too there. We're not going to get into the makeup of every economy in the world. I'm still trying to explain where this $3 trillion comes from. I swear we're going to get to it. So, one of the reasons that other people want treasury bonds, and one of the big reasons you hear, who's heard the phrase, China owns all of the U.S. debt? Mm-hmm. Have you heard this before? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, the way that it generally works is that when you export to a country, you make that money back from the suppliers and whoever bought it in US dollars. So, for example, my books, the boxes located behind you, are made in China, and I paid them through my middleman through a US supplier. They got paid in USD, but they need to pay their workers, they need to pay their rent, they need to pay everything in yuan, which is their local currency, right? But they want... It's very hard to talk and explain at the same time. This is why we don't talk at the same time that I make podcasts. There's a lot of nachos that's still left on this plate, and I'm very concerned about my credit rating in the nacho economy that we created. It's going to be an issue. I'm going to get back to it. I'm just concerned about my nachos. They're very important. All right.
Where were we?
Where were we? All right. So they need to trade that currency. When they trade it, it means that essentially their currency starts to be more scarce in the economy, which means the value of it goes in the world economy, the world market, and the value of it goes up, right? When things are scarce, they tend to get more valuable. And when there's more of something in the economy, it tends to get less valuable. So you would think that US dollars would get less and less valuable on the market. But because we have such a large economy, and because of the makeup of our economy, and because all of these US dollars are flowing around everywhere, export economies, particularly China, India, Japan is actually currently the largest holder of US Treasury bonds, which I did not know. They switched sometime last year. One of the ways in which they do this is that they try to actually suppress their exchange rate. And most foreign currencies can't do this, but one of the ways that they are able to do this is because they have a command economy, so to speak. That means that they can do a bunch of things that other governments can't do. Price controls, they can essentially limit the rate of inflation. They can do a bunch of things on the consumer side to prevent inflation. And so one of the ways that they keep their currency low rather than getting it more valuable, because they want to keep exporting to the world, because that's their whole plan for their economy, is exports to other countries, is that they need to buy and hold U.S. Treasury bonds so that we don't get too much U.S. currency on the world markets, so that it remains relatively scarce relative to the amount of it in the world. And so Chinese yuan stays lower vis-a-vis the US dollar. Is this making some sense?
There's a lot going on there.
There is a lot going on there. So essentially, when everybody's trading for these US dollars, the Chinese central bank, which is the bank that makes currencies in any country that makes a currency, not every country makes a currency, but when they have it, they need to buy and hold it in something. And just like you and me, we don't hoard tons of cash, right? And we don't sit there and have our retirement portfolios invested in a bunch of US dollars. Instead, they're invested in bonds, which tend to be US Treasury bonds, among some other bonds. So it is a secure way for them to store a lot of US dollars and keep those dollars off the world market. And they buy the excess US dollars available floating in the world economy. What are those dollars? Those are bonds issued by the federal government. Have we figured it out? Oh, Vika asked to be a collections agent for my Nacho loans. I really like that this conspiracy analogy is turning in now to a very complicated thing. I'm going to eat some nachos and I want you to explain back to me.
Oh, God. That's a challenge.
I know. All right. So, explain back to me what U.S. Treasury bonds are.
Okay. U.S. Treasury bonds are when other people or countries are buying fake money that the U.S. made.
It's true.
And because they think that somebody else will buy it again later, preferably the U.S., which is where it came from, and they'll make more when it gets bought back. Right? And they do that because that's safer than holding... Well,
they're actually buying the debt. They're not buying the fake money that we create yet.
Okay.
They are buying the note that says, we have this debt, but we're going to pay it back. In real dollars.
Do you have to have the debt already in order to sell it, or can you just make it up?
Are you a U.S. congressperson? No, that's the real question. So, who can make up debt?
But I mean,
in this case.
Because, I could sell somebody... I could reverse loan money, right? I can be like, here, I'll have some securities in my Bank of Aaron.
Yeah, that's legitimately not allowed. That's why you have to have a securities license to sell securities.
Sure,
but a securities license gives you the ability to sell the made up money in the market, but it doesn't give you the ability to make it. The only people that can make money are central banks, which we call it printing money. People that don't want you printing money in your basement and then trying to exchange it. That's actually called scrip, which is a totally different discussion. We're not going to get into that. Scrip is legal, but only in certain cases.
But if I like actually owe somebody $1,000,
yes,
then I could actually like sell that debt to somebody else, right?
Theoretically, yes.
What if I don't actually owe somebody $1,000? Can I sell that debt if I don't actually owe it?
Kind of. It's called a certificate of deposit. Technically, a certificate of deposit is a liability security, but this is very complicated. We shouldn't get into certificates of deposit. The reason you can't do this is because you don't have the power. I mean, you do kind of have the power on your own individual basis, which is that as an American with access to a credit card at any time, you can create your own liability note.
By spending money on the credit card?
Uh-huh.
Because then... Okay, right, because then I owe somebody money, and the credit card company can sell that to some other company.
Yes.
That actually happens with mortgages all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Mortgages get sold.
Yeah. Well, and that's all the bonds. We're not buying our bonds. Most of us are not buying our bonds directly from the U.S. Treasury. We're not buying our bonds from... So remember when I said governments can issue bonds? Whenever you vote for a bond on your, like, city, you know, it'll say, this thing is going to raise your property taxes. That's what it is. When you're voting on a bond, like a school bond or something like that, that is a government saying, hey, we would like to do this thing. We'd like to expand our school. And this is going to cost this much money. And we would like you, the taxpayers, to pay for it. And you're going to pay for it by all of your property taxes are going to get raised. And that is issuing a bond. And you can vote against it. So that is one of the ways that you as an individual can kind of create. But it's not just you as an individual, because one vote won't swing a bond measure. Usually it could. Vote. Make sure you vote if you're in the US. If you're in Australia, you have to vote. Otherwise, you get charged money. Oh, I'm actually really curious about this. If there's still any Australians on the stream. Were you guys exempted from having to vote? Because I know there's a fine if you don't vote, but you were supposed to vote like right in the middle of the pandemic. And you don't have vote by mail. So I'm really curious, did like they get charged money?
Dang, there's no vote by mail?
I don't think so. So I'm really curious. So did you end up getting charged money for the pandemic? Joe says we do.
Oh, vote by mail.
In regard to... You do a vote by mail? Oh, okay. But is it automatic like it is in my state or no? Or do you have to like opt into it? I was just really curious because it seemed like it would be unreasonable to like punish people for not voting because you get a fine in Australia. It's very small, but... Oh, what were we voting for? Maybe it was not in your part of the country. I don't know if you have like special elections. I thought you were having a vote, but maybe it was in the other side of the country, and maybe not Western Australia. I don't know if it only has it one day of the year in Australia or anything.
Anyway, that was...
Amanda says this is bringing back some vague memories from intro to macroeconomics and world economics. Good. Solid. Vague memories is what we're doing. Joe says we do vote by mail, but you have to opt in. Yeah, that's great. Vika says, if you're in Russia, you either vote for Putin or you vote for Putin, since Putin always gets elected. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I like democracy. That's all I have to say. Let's not get this booted off by, like, Russian bots, but because we mentioned Putin and then democracy. I feel like the chances that suddenly how this stream gets hacked is high. Joe says, oh, if it was local council elections on the eastern states, I think they did have a vote. It would have been via post. Okay. Anyway, I was very interested in that because I saw some people, like, contemplating whether or not, like, voting was going to happen and they were going to get charged money. All right. Where are we at? So what part do we not understand yet? You understand the concept of bonds. Do you understand who buys them?
Other countries who want to park money somewhere that's safe.
Anybody who invests. So institutional investors, which would be your pension, your retirement account, you most likely own some bonds.
You can buy them directly like stocks?
Yeah, usually I buy a bond, like...
Like a group of them?
Yeah, yeah.
Someone makes like a group fund. Okay.
I have a bond index fund. And you don't, like, go to Hamilton County, Ohio, and go, hey, I'd like to buy your bond for the school building. Sounds like a good deal. I believe you're going to pay it back. Instead, what happens is you buy all of the bonds together, which includes some U.S. Treasury bonds. However, central banks will explicitly buy U.S. Treasury bonds because our economy, because the dollars are floating out there, and some of them are doing it because it's a really secure asset and they have unsecure currencies, or because they're trying to peg to the U.S. dollar. Vika said sorry. No! It's valid to talk when talking about voting if you live in an authoritarian state to talk about it. I feel like I'm already targeted by Russian trolls. I don't need to step it up, but they haven't found the YouTube channel yet. So, or the one person watching on Instagram. Thanks, whoever's watching on Instagram. I don't know if we explained this before or after you left, but we're having nachos. I'm mainly doing this on YouTube. There is a better camera on YouTube, but I thought I would try it on Insta Live. That's it. That's the lesson. So we're over on YouTube/Anomaly. All right. We've got it. There's still 20 people here hanging on, watching us talk about nachos and talking about nachos and U.S. Treasury bonds. Okay. So now, let's get to the magic money part of it. So, we're issuing these bonds and other people are buying them, and we know that they still value them because even despite the fact that we've issued tons of them, they are still trading at less than 1%. They're actually less than 0.5% right now, U.S. Treasury bonds yields. So that means that everybody's pretty sure that we're going to pay our money back. And there is actually credit ratings for the U.S. There is credit ratings for every country. We have what is called a AAA credit rating. Back when there was a shutdown and congressmen, the people that decide if we're going to pay back our debt or not, and they were arguing about whether or not they were going to raise the debt ceiling in the U.S., that was a question about whether or not we were going to pay back our bills. And that question led for us to get a slight downgrade in our credit rating because it started to make people nervous that maybe we weren't going to pay back our bonds. Joe said that it's a Sunday morning and there's nothing better to do. Thank you. I hope this is a nice, calm stream for people.
I might have to steal a chip tax.
I did hear last night that it was very frustrating when I didn't finish a donut during a stream. So I have to make sure I finish these nachos.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So.
The cat's up there, taking a bath. Okay.
Yeah, Vika, what time is it for you? Isn't it like 4 a.m.? All right. So. Now we've got the U.S. Treasury bonds. We get it. We understand those. Do we understand where the debt is made? How they decide to do it?
How they decide?
Yeah. I mean, well, let's not get too deep into the legislative priorities.
They decide to make new debt when they need... No, I don't get it.
Oh, Josh came over from Instagram.
Oh, excellent.
Hi, Josh. Josh has, like, known my stuff on the internet now for, like, an alarming number of years, like 20 years or something. So, hi, Josh. So, we have U.S. Treasury bonds. Congress people or lawmakers, so Parliament in the UK, and most countries in the world have a Parliament, they all get together and they decide, hey, we want to spend money on something. Or maybe the voters decide that they want to spend money on something, like they do with a bond measure for the schools in the U.S. We mentioned there was a cat. Now the chat's just kitty, kitty, kitty.
Do we have to?
We may or may not be able to figure this out. Denise says that I, for one, am stoked you're doing these weekly, even if you just discussed candy samples. Cool! I mean, I would love to discuss candy samples. Anybody want to send me some candy samples? All right.
We might get a couple seconds of cat before this battery runs out.
Switching to kitten.
Cat cam.
This is a cat cam.
Kitten. Cat. And the battery's out.
Oh, the battery just ran out. I'm sorry. We weren't trying to deprive you of the cat that quickly.
I have to go switch the battery if we're going to get more cat cam. She's very cute.
She's very cute. That's all you really need to know. All right. So, they get together. They decide to issue some debt. And then people have to go buy those bonds. What do you think happens when a bunch of people buy these bonds?
Money. They buy them, so they pay the government. And they get a piece of paper that says they're going to pay back.
Mm-hmm. One thing we're worried about is what if people aren't buying bonds? What if people go, oh crap. What happened? The U.S. economy is in free fall right now. Everyone's getting laid off. Why would I want to buy U.S. Treasury bonds?
So they're worried that it's a riskier investment now because of unknown circumstances.
Because of
everything.
Gestures broadly.
Yeah.
So, then what happens? Any ideas?
Nobody buys the bonds.
Nobody buys the bonds. What happens? Interest rate goes up?
Why would the interest rate go up?
Because you want to make them more attractive to people.
Oh, right. Okay, so you're like, I'll pay you more to buy this bond? Like, please take it? Mm-hmm. I'll give you 1%, 2%.
Yeah. And
we're going to take it for 4%.
Interest rate. We don't want the interest rate to go too far up, because what happens when the interest rate goes up? This is a basic economics thing that you would know if you took macroeconomics, and otherwise would have no idea.
I did not take macroeconomics.
So what is the thing that you always hear people, oh, if we're printing money, we're going to get... Inflation. High interest rates equal inflation. So that's one of the concerns. No.
Do I need to understand why?
No. Okay. That's a different stream. I feel like we could get into it, but like
there's a lot of layers here.
Yeah, there's just a lot of layers. So, but what you want to know is that we are afraid right now of the idea of having inflation go up. So,
you don't want inflation to go up, so you don't want to offer too much interest on these bonds.
Right.
But you have to offer more if nobody's buying them.
Yes.
Is this why it gets stuck?
Well, that could be one of the things that are stuck. It doesn't appear to be a problem. People are still buying U.S. Treasury bonds because, once again, remember what I said. They are considered the safest asset class in the world.
Even if
what do you want to invest in right now, Aaron, when you are freaked out and uncertain?
Safe things.
Safe things. So, it turns out we haven't had a problem with this yet. However, there is one big buyer of U.S. Treasury bonds that can do something. And that is another wing of the government, this magical wing called the Federal Reserve, or the central bank.
Okay.
The central bank are the people that print the money, so to speak. They do actually print the money, but they also move a lot of money around that's all just numbers in computers, because it wouldn't actually be possible to print $3 trillion, nor does anybody want this money delivered to them in stacks of cash.
They're the ones that all the bank transfers go through, right? Like when you write a check, it gets cleared through there?
Through the U.S. Treasury?
Yeah. No?
Theoretically, yes. No? FDIC does? For the purposes of this, let's just talk about their monetary policy. Okay. So, they can buy U.S. Treasury bonds.
Why would they?
To keep the general interest rate low on the world market.
So if nobody's buying them, and they don't want to raise the interest, because that would be bad.
Yeah.
Someone has to buy them. Mm-hmm. So they buy it so that it's bought.
Yes.
That sounds like a...
scam?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is. This is where the magic money enters, right? So this is the money. This is the question of where does this money come from? It does come from the Federal Reserve. We call it printing money. And to be clear, the vast majority of that $3 trillion is not printed money. It is U.S. Treasury bonds that we've issued as debt to the world. But essentially, the Federal Reserve said, we will do whatever we need to do in this current crisis. They've said their biggest concern is that we'll have a financial crisis as well as a global crisis. And the way you prevent a financial crisis or a liquidity crisis is that you make sure that interest rates are still low and that you have tools like this available to you, because the interest rate, the central bank sets the interest rate to banks. They're the ones that lend money to banks at the overnight window, which I like to imagine is an actual window where all the banks like drive up and then they every night they like deposit, but the overnight window is actually just like a phrase that they use in banking. But I like to imagine it's like a drive up window where they go. I've gotten off track here.
Okay. So we were at not wanting to raise the interest rate because that's bad. Mm-hmm. So instead, Federal Reserve will buy the bond so that somebody has bought it so that people see that they are still buying bonds and people are still buying bonds.
Yes.
So it's like, even though it's something nobody wants, they make it look attractive by buying it.
Kind of. Yeah, a little bit. But at the same time, it's also... Oh, we lost some of our zest.
Oh, no.
This light died. Wait, how does it plug in?
USB-C on the side. That's normally those last the whole stream.
They probably had to, they probably didn't have a full battery when we started.
Yeah. Then tap the button on the side again. Okay.
It's very important to have the mood lighting.
I know, Oh, no. Oh, no.
Everything's fine.
Oh, no. Uh-oh, is it on or off now? Look at the back. The back has the screen. Is the screen on? Then just have it once. There we go.
All right.
And we're back.
We're back with fun lighting, although a more cluttered view because we can't go off there. Okay. I like how we're just like leaving this Insta stream all up. Okay. Oh, Jess Paul's still here. Great. All right.
Okay, we're almost there.
I like that you came for donuts and you got U.S. Treasury bonds. Okay. We're almost there. We almost have described the concept of money, which is very exciting. Okay. So
it's like if you're picking a team, picking people for a team, you want to like pick someone so that the rest of the team doesn't look like it's a bad team, so that I don't know where I'm going with this.
You're picking a ringer for your team? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, you want to make sure that the
I like how you try to use sports analogies. Bring it back to nachos. We understand nachos. We don't understand sports.
We understand nachos. I don't want you to think that the nachos, it was a bad batch of nachos.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make sure that I eat the nachos to demonstrate that they're good, even if they aren't. I want you to make sure that you finish it.
But also imagine that I know you have an infinite well of nacho making supplies over there. That if you decide, you can just wave.
I could just make a better batch of nachos if I
at any time. At any time.
Okay.
Theoretically. So, does that make some sense?
Okay, yep.
Okay, so the big thing to be concerned about is that the thing that we talked about in inflation rates, you get inflation. The big thing that you're very concerned about, which comes up in every macroeconomics 101, is the idea that if you print too much money, which is what they're doing, they're not actually printing money, it's all magic money that moves around on screens, no actual printing of money will be involved, but they are printing money, they're creating money out of thin air, which is the advantage of being a central bank. They're the only people that can do that. They're the only people that can create money out of thin air.
So that just means that there's like a certain number of dollars that exist in total. And they decided there's more now.
And they decided to park them in U.S. Treasury bonds. And they have bought those U.S. Treasury bonds with dollars that did not previously exist. They made them up.
Wait, you lost me again. So let's say that there was in total 5 trillion U.S. dollars in the world.
Yes.
And it exists some in paper money. Some of it is in computers
Yes.
in banks.
There's a lot more than 5 trillion US
Sure.
dollars in the
I
world.
know.
Just so everybody knows, there's a lot more. Because it would be scary if they
Yeah.
passed a fiscal stimulus bill that was...
But let's just say there's some total number. Printing money, I thought you were saying that just means that they have decided that now there is 5.5 trillion.
That's what the central bank does. But
Yeah.
then it goes out and buys those treasury bonds. Because remember, we've got all these treasury bonds that the lawmakers decided, hey, we want to inject money into the economy. And we are going to inject money into the economy to pay you and me through these payroll protection loans, through these stimulus dollars that I spent on donut
Okay.
hats and jumpsuits. We are going to take that money and we are going to pay it back at some point in the future. And the way that we are going to do that is we are going to issue debt, which is these U.S. Treasury bonds.
Yep.
And other governments are going to buy them. You and me are going to buy them. But one of the big buyers here, that is the guns that can come in if we're worried that it's getting up there and people aren't buying them, although people do appear to be buying them, is the Federal Reserve, which is our central bank.
So what happens when they buy it?
When they buy it, they have those treasury bonds, and
And wait, are they buying it with money they've just decided exists now?
yes, so they made up
that's
money.
where the money came from.
That's where they created the money. So they essentially said, yes, we have money. We would like to buy these nachos from you. So they were like, oh, yes. We'll just make this out of thin air. This is the magician property of the Federal Reserve.
And we're okay with this because...
Because the money has to come from somewhere. At some point, we have to print money. But the big concern is if you print too much money in order to buy these bonds or to do anything, what happens? You get inflation. And this is the classic macroeconomic. We heard about this in post-World War I Germany, right? They had hyperinflation, which is one of the reasons the euro is pretty much controlled by the Germans, also because they have the largest GDP in Europe. But aside from that, they absolutely, Germany is paranoid of hyperinflation because they had terrible hyperinflation. And what is hyperinflation? Do you know like what it looks like in someone's daily life? Like what it would look like in our life? Money is just like the price of goods is going up so fast you can't keep track.
So
you can't have
inflation
price
is
tags on the
normal.
shelf.
Like 10 years ago, groceries cost less. Fine, whatever. We deal with it because it was a gradual change.
Small amount of inflation.
But if suddenly tomorrow the price of everything doubled...
Yeah, that would be very annoying. Everything you own would be worth half as much. Yeah. Your paycheck that you get on Friday, if you don't spend it the next Saturday, it suddenly is worth half as much, right? So that's what hyperinflation is. And when you see, like, you know, Zimbabwe was fighting hyperinflation a couple years ago, which is why I have like a 1 million Zimbabwean dollar somewhere around here. But people were having to take barrels full of money to the supermarket because you couldn't keep enough cash around. And the solution to hyperinflation is to stop printing money. But the problem is when people need money for everyday goods and services, and you stop printing it, you end up in a massive depression because there's real human costs to stopping printing money because people still need that. The price of goods still is going up.
So by printing money, you mean buying the bonds with money that didn't exist before.
Yeah. Or any kind of creating money to pay any kind of debt.
Don't do that.
Which is, just to be clear, I don't know how much people know about World War II history. Probably more than me, or World War I history. I only really know the economic history and vaguely what I recollect from like high school. But Germany had to pay reparations to the rest of Europe, essentially. And all of those reparations tanked their economy. And one of the reasons they ended up in hyperinflation is they tried to issue all of these German bonds to the world, but the bonds weren't being bought. And that's how they got hyperinflation. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We're not doing great on the world stage as a country, but our currency is still the dominant currency around the world for trade, and we are still the largest GDP. So those bonds that the Federal Reserve has, they're mostly just sitting on. And one of the reasons we're not super concerned about inflation is because these aren't going out into the economy and being spent on goods and services in the same way, right? What are most people doing with these stimulus dollars?
Paying rent?
Paying rent. Which isn't grossly increasing the price of goods in the economy. Maybe there were runs on a few small things, like we saw toilet paper go up by like 500%, and we had inflation. But that had more to do with
webcams.
scarcity and webcams, as Aaron will note. But that had more to do with scarcity in the economy and small runs. But that wasn't actually like very real inflation. Most people are either saving that, and that's one of the reasons I asked people, what are you doing with your stimulus dollars? And the vast majority of people said, I'm saving them because of uncertainty. I'm sitting on them. And that's also true with what a lot of these banks are doing. They're sitting on these U.S. Treasury bonds because one of the people that buys U.S. Treasury bonds from the central bank when they buy them are our own banks here in the U.S. and they buy them at that overnight drive-up window. I like how everybody else is going to have the mental image of the overnight window as a drive-up window.
So, okay, we're
the sound and image is no longer lined up.
We should, there's not any way to fix that right now.
Oh, okay. All right.
We're also past an hour. We're also past an hour, so how should we...
Is everybody going to be very upset if I don't finish these nachos?
What's the summary?
What's the summary? I want you to explain back to me where the money comes from.
Okay, there's a lot. That was a lot.
Yep.
There was a whole hour. I don't know if I can... Okay. So...
Do it with nachos, too.
Do it with nachos?
No, you don't have
No, that's really hard.
Okay.
So, how does this all start? Wait, why did this start? What triggers this?
We needed to put money in the economy because we had to halt the economy.
Oh, okay. So people aren't spending money anymore because no one's going outside.
Well, people aren't doing anything anymore. They're not creating things, which is how our economy is fueled.
Right. Okay. So we're not making anything. Nothing's happening. Everybody still needs to be able to spend their rent money.
Night, Vika.
And spend money on rent and food and things that just happen. And
keep your employees on payroll.
Keep your employees on payroll.
Pay your landlord.
But all the money stopped moving around. So they need to make money move around again. So they can do that by creating these... Oh, no, the chat disappeared too. Everything's going to sleep. The cat's asleep too. So they needed to make money happen. And Aaron did not sign up for the pop quiz. Yeah, I did not. I signed up for nachos, and I got my nachos.
Nope. You have to explain it.
So we need money to move around. So they had to make new money happen. They do that by creating all these bonds to go into various things.
Yep.
Like payroll and other parts of the system. Mm-hmm. And anybody can buy the bonds. But very few people are buying the bonds. So the Treasury buys all the bonds.
Well, the concern is that very few people are buying the bonds.
Okay.
But most of the bonds are being bought, which is why the interest rate is still low.
Got it, right. Most of them are still being bought, so we haven't had a bad inflation yet. Mm-hmm. So, but the Treasury is still buying them.
Some of them.
To sort of make sure that other people keep buying them.
Yep.
Make sure they still look attractive. And
one of the reasons they're attractive to people buying them is that they know that the U.S. Treasury will step in. Which is one of the things that, if you know who any economist is, you might not know who a single economist is, but you probably, if you know just one economist, this is who you will know, John Maynard Keynes. John Maynard Keynes is essentially, we're all Keynesians now, is a classic quote. But John Maynard Keynes is essentially the basis of Keynesian economics. One of the things is the animal spirits. And the animal spirits is how we all feel. And it turns out how we all feel, us, individuals, consumers, people buying and trading bonds, it's very important. We call it sentiment. That's the official economics term for it, is sentiment. And that's one of the reasons we measure it, economic sentiment. But the animal spirits, so to speak, are really important. And one of the ways that the Treasury gets other people to buy bonds and remain confident, and the animal spirits can keep moving the market, is by saying, we will buy any that are left over and make sure that there is not inflation in the U.S. economy. We are committed to keeping the U.S. dollar low. This is also one of the reasons why the chairman of the Federal Reserve any word that there has been times in history where the chairman of the Federal Reserve has said like a single word in a press conference and it has caused the markets to freak out. And because of that, that's one of the reasons that, one, the Federal Reserve has to be a politically independent institution. They just care about monetary policy. They are not involved in fiscal policy. So they are not the ones that are deciding to issue this debt. They just sit there. The only instrument they have is printing money, buying bonds. It's printing money, essentially. And that's why it's very important they be separate, because if you didn't trust what was going on politically, then markets could massively shift because of what we think is going to happen to the monetary supply. So it's very important they are kept separate. Anyway, so you pretty much summed it up.
Okay.
So where is the money coming from, though?
It's coming from the Federal Reserve deciding that there is now more money.
Yes.
And then buying bonds to actually make the money go into the economy.
Kind of. It's actually coming from debt. So we went out and got credit cards with everyone in the world. Which are the bonds.
Which are the bonds. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that it actually comes from lawmakers. That's where the money is coming from. But there is extra money made because we are already in debt, obviously. So we had to issue more debt. And then part of that debt is bought by making more currency.
So some of it is people, other countries buying U.S. bonds with their money, which then gives us more. But it's not making up new money because the money came from that country.
Yes. Do you know where the country gets the U.S. dollars that they use to buy U.S. bonds?
No.
Because we buy a bunch of goods from them and we send their money in U.S. dollars. I told you I'd bring it back around to the whole Chinese exports thing at one point in time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yes. The hand-wavy stuff that we use as assumptions is animal spirits. That is the definition of... Everybody's very concerned about animal spirits. And, like, it as a phrase, it just means this. I actually have a Planet Money t-shirt that they did ages ago. It was a very cool Kickstarter project they did in the early days of Kickstarter. But it is a squirrel holding a cocktail, and it is meant to indicate the phrase animal spirits. Spirits being cocktails. Anyway, I think it's funny. Claire said, I'm going to continue with my belief that the economy is magic. I think I just proved that to you, right?
I'm pretty sure that's what you just said.
I mean, it's all numbers moving around on a computer, and then in the end, it's the decision of a couple people at the Federal Reserve deciding to print more money. So, yes.
Yeah.
Clearly, the animal spirit of the economy is a cat. No, the stock market is a cat, but the economy as a whole is, like, something slightly more rational, I think. Because, like, the stock market will just, like, run around at high speeds. I guess a cat does sleep a lot of the day, which I feel like the stock market does not do.
Oh, no, the stock market sleeps, right? Doesn't it go to bed
Not
every
like
night?
the world stock market.
Yeah,
And there's after hours trading and before hours trading. I don't know. What is the animal spirit of the market? I don't know. It's also, like, not meant to be the, like, your animal spirit. It's the animal spirits. It's different.
Okay.
I think it's less native appropriation than it sounds, because I think it's being used in a completely different way. Anyway. Claire said, yes, that is exactly what you just proved. But do you understand how the magic works a little better now? Amanda says that the market is a drunk squirrel.
Okay.
And I think that's probably fair.
I like it.
Yeah. Josh says, it's not all Keynesians. We got a lot of Van Muse's idiot in the Trump machine. Yeah, we could get into a different discussion at some point about maybe we can talk about Austrian versus Keynesian economics at some point. But yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a weird way to end.
Yeah. But I think you showed how the money appears.
I saw some appreciation for your pants on the stream,
they are,
by the way.
They're pretty great.
You should stand up and show them off.
They are tacos and hot sauce, which are two of the most important food groups.
They came from MeUndies.
Yeah, not sponsored.
Not sponsored. I'll take a
clarify.
Me&D sponsorship. I will. So if they want to sponsor me, go for it, because I'm happy to do a live stream where I discuss drunk squirrels, nachos, and U.S. Treasury bonds in their onesies. Claire said, is it like lizard brain? No, I still don't understand how the magic works. Damn it! That was the goal, was to get you to understand how the magic works. I think in the end, it's like important to understand that the magic isn't magic. The magic is actually just a bunch of people deciding things.
Yeah.
And it's the systems behind it are very logical numbers and computers. But the actual like magic part, the like, how do we decide to print more money? How do we decide that we need to put money into the economy? That's just people. It's just people, and they decide based on the systems that they have available, one of which is Keynesian economics. So, I don't know why we're talking about food groups right now, but it's, yeah.
It's the pants.
Oh, the pants, yeah.
The tacos and the hot sauce. Those are the two most important food groups.
I guess so. I'm not much of a chocolate person, so. I feel like we just, like, ran a weird marathon.
Yeah. I think we should take the half win.
The half win of, like, Aaron kind of understands it?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you understand it now?
I understand it more than I did
just
before.
Explained it back to me, so.
I will say I understand it more than I did before. I don't know if I could explain it again tomorrow.
Okay. That's fair. It's like we tried to cram you for an exam.
Yeah.
And it's going to be in your head for the exam, and then you're going to look back at the exam in a week and you're going to go, I have no idea what I wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Claire says that magic is just a bunch of people deciding things. I'm a witch, I can tell you that. See? Okay, fair. All right. Well, thank you all we've also stayed extremely steady with viewers.
Yeah.
So I'm really surprised that people haven't left, but this is great. Does anybody have like a nice softball question about the economy that we can end on? Or like an uplifting anecdote we could talk about before we head out? Because I feel like this is, yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Oh, yeah. I think the
Instagram decided that
Instagram was like...
It apparently lets you only stream for a limited time.
Sure, I'll share it to my story. Cool.
Cool.
We're all nerds. This is fun. We are. All right, well, can we move to the cat? Can we drag the cat down here and end on cat at least?
Yeah, we can end on a cat. Let me...
By the way, I think that my nachos are going to have to go into collection, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Jess says, I'm grateful for this. I already knew about 60%, but this sealed it up. That's good. I'm great that this helped sealed it up for you. I would love to talk more at some point about like what we call currency manipulation, which is what essentially China has been accused of. And there's some truth to that, but it's not that simple. I'd love to talk about it at some point. So, but we're going to drag the cat down
Might just do a remote cat viewing because she's very
she is very tired.
And I would hate to disturb. Go ahead and press the wide.
All right. Cat time. We'll end on a cat stream.
Kitten. She's so tired.
It's point of view cat petting.
She's so tired.
Oh, she's so tired. She's the tiredest kitten.
Tiredest kitten. Yes, kitten. Very good kitten. All right.
All right. Okay, folks. Thank you for joining. Should we just leave it on the cat while we say goodbye?
Sure.
All right. Well, Dora says goodbye. She says, stay hydrated, stay safe. We'll do another live stream next week. We'll do it on more actionable topics and less heady topics. Wash your hands. Stay safe. Go pet a cat if you can. Bye.